The night has fallen, and the world outside has grown silent. This is the time for stories that can only be told in the dark. Welcome to the Dark Hour. I am Pan, your narrator.
Have you ever been driving alone at night, that feeling when it's just you and the road ahead? Listen closely. If you ever find yourself on a road like that and you see a sign that reads US Route 13, don't stop for any reason. Never stop. Because on that road, you are not truly alone. There are other things out there in the dark, things that are waiting. And tonight, a trucker named Ray is about to break that rule. Welcome to Highway 13. Highway 13. Some roads are just strips of asphalt that connect point A to point B. But some roads are legends. US Route 13 is a legend. It isn't a glamorous interstate, but an old black serpent slithering through the most desolate parts of America, where towns died long ago and the radio waves never reach. Truck drivers have their own name for it, the Orphan Road, because once you're on it, at night, you are utterly alone. For Ray, a man who had spent more than 20 years of his life behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler, those stories were just to scare the new guys. He'd heard them all. Phantom hitchhikers, strange radio signals, towns that appeared and then vanished. To him, Highway 13 was simply a shortcut that saved a few hours, a reasonable trade-off. Tonight, the Orphan Road was proving why it had its name. The dashboard clock read 2:17 a.m. The world outside the cabin was an inky black void, broken only by the conical beams from his headlights, licking at the cracked asphalt ahead. The radio had surrendered long ago, leaving only the steady hiss of static, like the breathing of an empty world. And then, in the middle of that emptiness, Ray saw him. At first, it was just a shadow, a darker blot of ink against the night. As the truck rumbled closer, the shadow slowly took the shape of a man. He was standing on the shoulder, silent and motionless, his arm raised with his thumb pointed forward. A hitchhiker. Here, at this hour. Every safety rule Ray knew by heart screamed in his head. Don't stop, never stop on the Orphan Road. He'd heard stories of robberies, of madmen, and of things far worse. But there was something different about this. The man didn't look desperate. He wasn't waving his arms frantically. He just stood there, strangely patient, as if he wasn't just hoping for a car to pass, but was waiting for this specific truck. Ray's foot unconsciously left the accelerator and moved toward the brake. The massive truck slowed, the hiss of its air brakes tearing through the silence of the night. Ray had a few seconds to decide, a decision that could change everything. Reason 1. Without a moment's hesitation, Ray's foot pressed down hard on the accelerator. The diesel engine roared in protest, then obediently complied, pushing the tons of steel forward. A false sense of security enveloped Ray as the truck picked up speed. The truck swept past the man. In the brief moment it took, Ray glanced quickly through the passenger side window. The man didn't move, his face hidden in the shadow of his hat brim, still holding that same thumb-out pose.
Their eyes didn't meet, but Ray had the chilling feeling that he was being seen, measured, and judged. Then the moment was gone. In the rearview mirror, the figure shrank and was swallowed by the night. Ray let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. His heart was still pounding, but that was just the adrenaline. Right decision, he told himself, his hands tightening on the wheel. It was nothing. 20 minutes passed. 30 miles of road were left behind. Ray managed to find a country music station from some distant town. The mournful but familiar melody helped calm him down. The tension from before was now just a faint memory, a trivial story he could tell the other drivers at the next truck stop for a good laugh. And then, his headlights once again swept over a figure on the roadside. Ray muttered a curse. "No way!" His heart began to pound again, but this time it wasn't adrenaline. It was a primal fear. He squinted, trying to find a difference. Maybe it was someone else. Maybe he was just tired and his imagination was playing tricks on him. But no. As he got closer, an icy chill ran down Ray's spine. The same worn-out jacket, the same motionless stance, the same thumb pointing forward. It was him. Unmistakably, he was standing up ahead, waiting, as if Ray had never passed him at all, as if the last 30 miles had never existed. The truck was still hurtling forward at nearly 70 miles per hour. Ray realized he had less than a minute before he would pass him again. But this time, the sense of security was gone. The normal rules no longer applied. This was no longer a hitchhiker. This was something else. And it was right up ahead.
Ray floored it and left the hitchhiker behind. 30 miles were devoured by the diesel engine. A warm relief spread through his chest. He was right to trust his instincts. To break the silence, Ray fiddled with the radio knob. He cycled through the frequencies, getting only static and broken snippets of conversation from faraway places. He stopped on a quiet spot between two channels, where there was only the steady hiss of static. It was still better than absolute silence. He glanced at the clock, 2:41 a.m. Suddenly, amid the familiar hiss, another sound slipped through. It was small, a whispered voice, lost, as if broadcast from a century ago. Waiting. Just a single word, clear for a second, then lost again to the static. Ray shuddered. He twisted the knob again, but there was only static. Just interference, he mumbled, but his heart had started to beat a little faster. He tried to push it out of his mind, focusing on the yellow-white lines on the road. 5 minutes later, something else happened. Glancing quickly at the passenger side rearview mirror, for a split second, Ray swore he saw the silhouette of a person sitting in the passenger seat, just a dark, hazy shape reflected in the glass. He whipped his head around. No one. The passenger seat was empty. "You're tired, Ray," he said to himself, his voice trembling slightly. Just an illusion from sleep deprivation. But now the truck's cabin, his safe haven, suddenly felt suffocating. He wasn't alone anymore. It felt as if there was an invisible presence sitting with him, silently observing. He didn't dare look in the rearview mirror again. True fear isn't what you see, it's what you think you saw. The peace was completely gone. Now, with every passing mile, the unease in Ray grew. The threat was no longer outside, on the road behind him. It seemed to have gotten inside.
Ray's trembling hand reached for the CB radio microphone. He blew a thin layer of dust off it, flipped the switch to channel 19, the trucker's general channel. Silence. He keyed the mic. "Breaker 19?" His voice was hoarse. "Anyone got a copy on the Orphan Road? Come back." Only the hiss of static answered. The loneliness became even more pronounced. He felt like a fool. He was about to hang up the mic when another sound cut through the static. It was weak, intermittent, but it was definitely a voice. "Emergency. Somebody. Please." It was the voice of a woman, panicked and desperate. Ray's heart leapt. He keyed the mic again. "I read you. What's your location? What's wrong?" "Car's broken down near mile marker 113. The voice came through, mixed with sobs. "I've been stranded for hours. But there's something out there. In the dark. I keep seeing it move." A cold dread washed over Ray. He wasn't imagining things. His fear was real. "You stay in your car and lock the doors," Ray said, his voice now firm. "I'm near mile marker 105. I'll be at your location in 10 minutes. Stay on the line." "Thank you. Oh God, thank you." The woman's voice had a glimmer of hope. In that moment, Ray felt like a hero. His own fear was replaced by a purpose to save someone. He hit the gas, the 18-wheeler thundering through the night. He had someone to save. He wasn't alone anymore. "This is Ray," he said into the mic. "What's your name?" "Sarah." "Don't you worry, Sarah. I'm almost there. Can you see my headlights yet?" "No, it's still so dark. Wait." Sarah's voice suddenly cut out. "Sarah, are you still there?" Ray asked, a sense of foreboding rising in him. The silence stretched for a few seconds. Then, from the crackling speaker, came a sound. It was a scream. A blood-curdling, terrified scream cut short by a loud thud, as if something had slammed against the body of a car. It was followed by the sound of shattered glass and a guttural snarl, an unhuman, throaty sound. "Sarah!" Ray yelled into the mic. Only silence answered. Channel 19 had returned to its soulless hiss. Just then, Ray's headlights illuminated a scene up ahead. A small, old convertible was parked on the shoulder, right next to a sign that read, "Mile marker 113. The driver's side door had been torn open and was hanging crookedly from its hinges. Ray slammed on the brakes, the 18-wheeler skidding down the road with a terrible screech. He jumped out of the cabin, and the silence of the night enveloped him. Not a sound. Sarah's car sat there like an empty shell. On the ground next to the door lay a shattered cell phone. And leading away from the road, dug deep into the desert dust, were two long drag marks, as if someone, or something, had pulled a struggling person into the endless darkness of Highway 13. Ray backed away, his eyes fixed on the darkness where the drag marks disappeared. He couldn't go in there. To go in there was death. But he couldn't just leave either.
The image of the woman and her scream haunted his mind. He turned and scrambled back into the truck's cabin. The slam of the door sounded hollow in the night. He fumbled with the lock, a meaningless gesture, but it was the only thing he could do to feel safer. His heart hammered against his ribs. The cabin, his sanctuary, now felt like an iron cage, and he was the animal trapped inside, waiting for the hunter. His trembling hand snatched the radio microphone. "Sarah, can you hear me? It's Ray. Please, if you can hear me, answer." Silence. Only the steady hiss of static, as if mocking his panic. "Please, Sarah," he whispered, desperate. And then another sound broke through. It was not Sarah's voice. It was a breath. A deep, wet, heavy breath amplified through the radio speaker. It sounded like the breathing of a drowning animal full of malice. The sound seemed to fill the entire cabin, making the air thick and hard to breathe. Ray held his breath, his body frozen. After the breathing, a voice spoke. It was deep, raspy, and inhuman, as if stones were grinding against each other. It slowly mimicked the last word Ray had heard from Sarah. "Thank you." It wasn't her voice, but a grotesque imitation of it, a cruel mockery. Immediately after the words ended, slam! A powerful force struck the roof of the truck's cabin. The entire massive vehicle shook violently. Ray yelled, thrown forward, his head hitting the steering wheel. Above him, the sound of scraping metal shrieked, as if giant claws were trying to tear through the steel shell to get inside. It was here. It was on his roof. The hunter had found its prey. Ray was no longer a witness. Now he was the target. The scraping grew frantic right above his head. The sound of metal being clawed on the roof grew more frantic. Ray screamed, fumbling for the revolver he kept hidden under the seat. He was about to fire straight up into the ceiling, leaving it all to chance. The monster let out a triumphant roar, and a deep dent appeared directly above Ray's head. It was about to break through. Suddenly, the scraping stopped. An unnatural silence fell. The monster on the roof froze. Ray, still trembling, heard a soft hiss from it. But this time, the sound wasn't aggression. It seemed to be anxiety, fear. Outside, something had changed. From far down the road in the direction Ray was heading, a cluster of pale blue light appeared. It didn't look like the headlights of any vehicle. It hovered several feet above the ground, completely silent, and cast a cold, ghostly light that illuminated a vast patch of the desert. The light moved, not in a straight line, but drifting bizarrely like a jellyfish floating in a sea of night. The monster on the roof hissed again, this time in clear panic. Ray heard it scrambling down from the roof. He glanced in his rearview mirror. In the strange blue light, Ray could clearly see the shape of the hitchhiker. He was no longer human-shaped, but a tall, gaunt creature with unnaturally long limbs. It was staring intently at the blue light. And then, without hesitation, it turned and scrambled into the darkness on the side of the road, the same direction it had dragged Sarah, and vanished. The blue light hovered there for a few more seconds, as if observing, then slowly faded, returning Highway 13 to its pitch-black, absolute silence. The immediate threat was gone, but Ray was now more terrified than before. He realized a horrifying truth. He was trapped on a road that was the territory of not just one, but multiple dreadful forces. And the force that had just appeared was powerful enough to make the other one flee. Ray sat frozen in his cabin, heart racing. The monster was gone. The strange blue light was also gone. The night and the silence returned, but now they felt heavier, more oppressive. He didn't understand what he had just witnessed, only that he had accidentally stumbled into a war he didn't belong in. Sitting here wasn't an option. To stay meant waiting for one of those two forces to return. Trembling, Ray put the truck in gear and hit the gas. The truck rolled forward, leaving Sarah's empty car behind like a tombstone on the roadside. He had to go, had to get somewhere with lights, with people. About half an hour later, through the shock, Ray saw something he didn't think was real. A faint neon glow up ahead. A sign that read, "Eat." A 24/7 diner standing alone in the middle of nowhere. It was a sign of life. Ray pulled into the empty parking lot and stepped inside. A small bell on the door chimed hollowly. The diner was strangely clean, but empty, except for an old waitress wiping the counter and two men sitting in a corner booth. It was these two men who caught Ray's attention. They wore dark blue work uniforms, old but clean, with an embroidered logo of a stylized crow on the chest. One was old, one was young, but they both shared the same terrifyingly calm expression. They were silently drinking black coffee from identical mugs. As Ray walked in, the younger man looked up. He didn't smile. He just looked at Ray with clear, emotionless eyes and said something that made Ray's blood run cold. "Your coffee's getting cold." Ray was stunned. The waitress didn't seem to hear, still busy wiping the counter. He hesitantly walked to the bar, and sure enough, there was a steaming mug of coffee waiting, as if it had been poured just for him. "We figured you'd be needing it," the older man said, his voice flat, without turning to look at him, "after a rough night." Who are you people?" Ray stammered, fear choking his throat. The older man slowly turned around. His face was deeply wrinkled, but his eyes were unusually bright. "We're the ones who make sure the road stays clear. Sometimes there's trash that needs to be cleaned up. A mess at mile marker 113, for example. We apologize for the inconvenience." They knew. They knew everything. They spoke of the monster's attack and Sarah's disappearance as if it was just an oil spill on the road. They were the eccentrics, the custodians of this haunted highway.
Ray took a deep breath, the smell of old coffee and bleach filling his lungs. The fear was still there, but now it was overshadowed by a burning need, the need to understand. "That thing, it took the woman," Ray said, his voice steadier than he expected. "And you people, you know about it. Who are you? And what the hell is this place?" The old waitress continued to wipe the counter, showing no reaction, as if she were deaf or not existing in the same space as them. The older road sweeper took a sip of his coffee. He didn't look at Ray, but out the window,
into the endless night of Highway 13? A very good question, he said, his tone pensive. What do you think a road is, Ray? Is it asphalt and gravel? Or is it a promise of somewhere else? He set his mug down. This Highway 13 is more than that. It isn't just a road, it's a stage. It's a book filled with unfinished stories, with sorrows that have no end. The younger road sweeper spoke up, his voice as flat as a machine. Every urban legend, every ghost story you've ever heard, they all had to start somewhere. This place is one of those places, a factory that produces tragedies. The woman you met, Sarah, she wasn't the first. She is merely the latest chapter in a sad story that is told over and over again. A story of loneliness, of desperation, and of a hitchhiker who never reaches his destination. And the thing that took her, Ray whispered, beginning to understand a truth more horrifying than any monster. It is also part of the story, the older man said. Perhaps it was once a victim, now turned into the villain, cursed to replay its role again and again, an endless loop of tragedy. He finally turned to look directly into Ray's eyes. His own eyes were deep and ancient. And we, he said, gesturing to his partner, are the stagehands, the keepers of the book. We make sure the actors don't stray from their parts, and we clean up after each performance is over. Ray felt his head spin. This wasn't reality. This was a nightmare with its own rules, its own logic. And he had accidentally driven right into the middle of it. What about me? Ray asked. What's my part? The older road sweeper smiled for the first time, a smile that held no warmth. Ah, now that is the most interesting question. The road chose you, Ray. Perhaps it was in need of a new actor. Or perhaps it was waiting to see if you were the one who could write a different ending to this old story. You're no longer just a lost truck driver, Ray. You are the reader, and you could also be the author. Ray looked down at his own hands, calloused from decades of gripping a steering wheel. These were the hands of a man, not a fictional character. He looked up, straight into the ancient eyes of the older road sweeper. No, Ray said, his voice hoarse but firm. I'm not a chapter in a book. He set his coffee mug down on the counter, the sound of ceramic hitting the formica like a gunshot in the silence. I don't know what you are or what kind of insane rules this place runs on, but I know Sarah was real. She was scared and she died. And I won't let her story or mine end the way you want it to. The younger road sweeper just watched silently, his face showing no emotion. But the older one, his wrinkled lips curled into something that was almost a smile. Interesting, he said softly. It has been a very, very long time since a reader wanted to do the writing himself. A change is always worth watching. He stood up, leaving a few coins on the counter. But be careful, driver. Changing a story isn't like changing a tire. When you try to erase one tragedy, you might accidentally create a worse one. As they walked out the door, the bell didn't chime. The older one paused at the threshold, turning his head halfway back. "Every story has a beginning, Ray, and they usually end where they started. If you truly want to find the author of this story, find the place where it was first written. Find the burnt-out car at mile marker 74. Then they stepped into the night and vanished. Ray stood alone in the diner. He drained the cold coffee, its bitterness waking him up. He left a dollar bill on the counter and walked out. When Ray got back into the cabin of his truck, the night of Highway 13 didn't seem as scary as before. It was no longer an invisible threat, but a challenge. An enemy had shown its face. He started the engine, its roar like a waking beast, but instead of continuing toward the dawn, toward safety, Ray turned the wheel, swinging the massive truck around. He was heading back to the most dangerous place. He was no longer running, he was hunting. Destination, mile marker 74. The truck's cabin, once his private world, now felt like a skull. Inside were his thoughts, and outside was a decaying reality. To keep himself awake, he focused on the small things, the steady hum of the engine, the feel of the wheel vibrating gently in his hands, the hypnotic white of the lane markers being swallowed by the darkness and reappearing again and again. The CB radio had been silent since the encounter at the diner. Ray didn't dare touch it. But then, it spoke on its own. The soft click, and the speaker began to hiss. But this time, it was different. Mixed in with the static were fragments of a conversation. A woman's voice, painfully familiar. "It's always the road, Ray. Always the next trip. You were never really here." Ray flinched. His whole body went cold. It was Linda's voice, his ex-wife. This conversation, it was from their last fight over 10 years ago. The memory flooded back unbidden. Linda's face, streaked with tears. Their little girl, Chloe, standing in the doorway, clutching her teddy bear. He had promised to be home for her birthday, but then a lucrative haul came up, a long trip, and he had thought, just one more. He had chosen the road, and when he returned, they were gone. The road had taken everything from him long before he had ever heard the name Highway 13. It was where he ran from his own ghosts. "I promised, Chlo, Daddy will be back in time." His own voice from the past echoed from the radio, distorted and distant, a broken promise. Ray reached out and shut off the radio. But the silence was worse, because now he wasn't alone anymore. He looked out the window, and on the shoulder, where the hitchhiker had stood, he saw a hazy figure, not the monster. It was Linda, wearing the floral dress she used to love, her face emotionless, her eyes boring into him as the truck passed. A few miles later, another figure, Chloe, his daughter, standing there, still holding that worn-out teddy bear, silently watching her father's truck disappear into the night. They didn't threaten him. They didn't attack. They were simply there, judging, existing. Ray finally understood. Highway 13 didn't just attack him with its monsters, it attacked him with his own ghosts. It dredged up his regrets, his failures, his broken promises, and projected them onto the night. The real horror wasn't what would kill his body, but what would crush his soul. This knowledge didn't weaken him. On the contrary, It brought him a cold clarity. He knew what he was fighting against. Not a beast, but a curse fed by sorrow and regret. The decision was made. Ray was no longer driving blindly into the darkness. He needed a map, and that map was written in history. He slowed the truck, letting it crawl down the empty road. With one hand still on the wheel, he pulled out his smartphone with the other. Its screen lit up, the only artificial light in the primordial darkness, creating long, strange shadows in the cabin. As he expected, the signal was only one bar, flickering in and out. Patience. He had to be patient. Ray opened the web browser. His calloused finger slowly typed into the search bar. Highway 13, Nevada accident, mile marker 74. Route 13, burned car legend. The pages loaded with frustrating slowness. The loading wheels spun and spun as if contemplating whether to reveal the road's secrets. Finally, among the irrelevant results, one link caught his eye. It wasn't from a major news site, but a local forum for strange phenomena. The last post made over a decade ago. Its title was The Groom's Curse, the Tragedy at Mile Marker 74. Ray clicked on it. The website had an old-fashioned design, white text on a black background, which made him feel like he was reading a forbidden document. And then he read the story. October 14, 1978. A young couple, David and Clara, were on their way to Reno to get married. They were eloping, running from disapproving families, with all their belongings packed in the back of an old Ford. David had promised Clara they would be there before sunrise, that they would start a new life. A promise. Ray's heart tightened as he thought of Chloe. But the car didn't make it. It died right at mile marker 74. The Post quoted an old police report. David had tried to fix the car in the dark. A spark from the engine ignited a leaking pool of gasoline. The fire erupted violently. David was thrown clear by a small explosion, but Clara was trapped in the passenger seat, her wedding dress catching fire. And this was the detail that made Ray shudder. David, in his panic and terror, ran. He ran into the desert to find help, leaving Clara screaming in the inferno. His last promise to her was, "I'll be right back." He never came back. Rescue crews found David's body days later, dead from dehydration, miles from the scene. In the burned-out car, they never found Clara's remains. The report concluded the fire was too intense and had consumed her completely. Ray put down his phone, everything suddenly became horrifically clear. The hitchhiker was David, cursed to forever stand on the side of the road trying to flag down a car to fulfill his final promise, to go back and save Clara. He was the embodiment of guilt and regret. And the monster that attacked Sarah, that furious, brutal entity, that was Clara. The rage of a person abandoned, betrayed in their most terrifying moment. The fury of a broken promise. Ray finally understood the role of each character in this tragedy. Just then, his phone screen flickered and went black. The battery had dropped from 60% to 0% in an instant. At the same time, his truck's engine sputtered and died with a final cough. The headlights flickered and went out. He was plunged into absolute silence and darkness. And he realized he was looking at a sign on the side of the road, faint in the moonlight. Mile marker 74. He had arrived. And from the darkness ahead, where the rusted, burned-out frame of a car sat on the shoulder, Ray heard a new sound. Not a snarl, not a breath. It was the sound of a woman sobbing.
The silence after the engine died was absolute. It was heavy, pressing on Ray's eardrums. So quiet he could hear the blood rushing in his own ears. The truck, his steel fortress, was now just a cold coffin. The sobbing. It came from the direction of the burned-out car, a sound of utter heartbreak, of a broken heart echoing through the decades. Ray knew it was Clara. The fear was still there, choking his throat. His instinct screamed at him to stay put, to lock the doors and pray. But the Ray from a few hours ago was gone. The man sitting here now was different. He was no longer a victim. He was the only person in the world, perhaps in history, who knew their whole story. And that knowledge gave him a burden, a responsibility. With a cold resolve, Ray unlocked the door. The dry click sounded like an oath. He stepped out of the truck. The desert night air was cold, but not as cold as the feeling in this place. Under the silver moonlight, the rusted frame of the old Ford looked like the skeleton of a long-dead beast. The sobbing grew louder as he approached, and then he saw her. Not the monster with claws and a snarl. It was the translucent figure of a young woman, wearing a tattered, smoke-stained white dress. She was huddled next to the car, her face in her hands, her body shaking with each sob. She was not the embodiment of rage. She was the embodiment of sorrow. Ray stopped a few feet away. His heart beat like a war drum. This was the decisive moment. He took a deep breath. Clara? His voice came out, just a whisper, but in this silence, it sounded like thunder. The sobbing stopped abruptly. The figure slowly raised her head. Her face was blurry, indistinct, but Ray could feel her eyes locking on to him, a surprise that had lasted for decades. No one had ever spoken her name. Just then, another presence appeared. On the other side of the road, under the moonlight, a man's figure emerged from the darkness, tall, thin, still in the pose of a hitchhiker, but this time he wasn't looking ahead. He was staring at Clara and at Ray.
David had arrived. The two souls of the tragedy had appeared together, drawn by an outsider who dared to speak their names. Ray stood in the middle, with abandoned sorrow on one side and eternal regret on the other. Clara began to stand up. The air around her grew cold, and her figure began to waver, to distort. The sorrow was giving way to the familiar rage. A snarl began to form in her throat. She had been awakened from her sadness, and now she saw the one who had caused it, standing right there.
Clara's rage was rising, ready to explode. David stood motionless in his regret. This was the moment the loop always repeated. Sorrow turned to anger, and regret could only watch. But tonight, there was a new element. Ray. He took a deep breath, the cold air burning his lungs, and spoke the words that could decide his fate. "You are both wrong." His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the crying and the silence like a knife. Both spirits froze, their full attention on him. "This curse," Ray continued, his voice hardening, "it isn't about love or tragedy. It's about selfishness." A hiss escaped from Clara. Her translucent figure began to unravel, not disappearing, but reforming into something more primal, more dark. Her sorrow had been insulted. "Selfish for not keeping your promise," Ray said, pointing at David. "And selfish for being unable to forgive." He turned to Clara. "The two of you have kept each other trapped here for almost 50 years, all because neither of you would let go of your own story." It was a mistake. He had thought logic and truth could move them, but he had forgotten he wasn't talking to people. He was talking to fossilized emotions. "You!" An inhuman, furious shriek tore through the night. It was Clara's voice, but now it was the roar of a wounded animal. The figure of the woman in the wedding dress vanished completely, replaced by a swirling entity of black smoke and rage, which shot directly toward Ray. David cringed, his own figure flickering before Clara's wrath. The loop was the same. He was still helpless. Ray knew he was about to die. No weapon could fight this. He had failed. And in that moment of facing death, a flash of truth flashed in his mind. He was wrong. The point wasn't to judge the story. The point was to change it. He had said the wrong thing. He had to correct his mistake. As Clara's essence was only a few feet away, Ray stopped looking at it. He turned to look directly at the guilty ghost of David, and he yelled with all his strength, not as a judge, but as a commander. "This wasn't her end, David. You made a promise. Keep your promise. Go back and save her." Those words, that final challenge aimed at the core of David's shame, had an unexpected effect. The ghost of David stopped trembling. For the first time in decades, he raised his head. The regret in his form was replaced by something else. Resolution. The broken promise. His curse. But now, someone was giving him a chance to fulfill it. While Clara lunged to tear Ray apart, David moved, not running away, but lunging forward toward Clara. His translucent figure grew more solid, brighter, as if gathering all its remaining energy. He reached out his arms, not to fight, but to embrace the fury of the woman he loved. The two spirits collided. There was no explosion, only a blinding flash of white light that consumed everything. Ray had to raise his hands to shield his eyes. In that light, he heard everything at once. Clara's scream, David calling her name, crying, laughing, and then a soft, final sigh of relief. The light vanished. Silence returned. The crying had stopped. The snarling had faded. The two ghosts were gone. All that was left was Ray, standing alone next to the burned-out frame of a car under the moonlight. His truck was still silent, its engine dead. The loop, it seemed, was broken. The tragedy had a new ending. But Ray was still stranded, alone, in the middle of the night on Highway 13. And he had a feeling that this road was not done with him yet.
The two road sweepers stepped out. They were still wearing their work uniforms, but now they looked more like men on the job than eccentrics in a diner. The younger man said nothing, walking directly to the front of Ray's truck and beginning to attach a massive tow chain. The older one walked to the cabin window where Ray sat frozen. He looked at the empty space where David and Clara had vanished, then looked at Ray. "Not bad," he said, his voice flat. "You rewrote an ending. Messy, emotional, very human, but effective. You cleaned up one of our oldest stories for us." You knew I could do it?" Ray stammered. "We don't know anything," the road sweeper answered. "We only observe, but we always have the tow truck ready. Every change leaves behind pieces that need to be cleaned up." He looked directly into Ray's eyes, and this time Ray saw not mystery, but an ancient weariness. "This road has lost a story," he said. "It's like a vacuum, a scar, and nature doesn't like a vacuum. That scar will soon be filled with a new story, a new tragedy." He paused for a moment. "Unless someone is there to tell a different one." This was no longer a conversation. This was an offer, a final crossroad. "We will tow your truck," he said, "and you have a choice. Your final choice on Highway 13. It was a choice made not with logic, but with the soul. A choice that only a person who has walked through their own personal hell could make. Ray looked at the older road sweeper. Behind him, the road stretched on, inviting him back to a world he no longer belonged to. A world of shipping manifests, lonely truck stops, and the ghostly memories of Linda and Chloe always sitting in the passenger seat. He had spent his whole life running on the roads. To leave now would just be another form of running. "If I go," Ray asked, his voice low and quiet, "who will stay to tell their story? Who will make sure that tragedy doesn't repeat with a different name, a different face?" The road sweeper didn't answer. He just stood there, observing, as he had observed for centuries. "I wasn't there for my family," Ray continued, this time as if speaking to himself. Maybe it's time I actually stayed on a road for someone." He looked down at his hands, then looked up, his gaze firm. "I'll stay." The older road sweeper gave a slight nod, a nod not of approval, but of acknowledgement, as if an ancient law of the universe had just been brought back into balance. "The road always needs a lamplighter,"
he said softly. "Welcome home, Ray." The younger road sweeper had finished attaching the chain. He silently climbed back into his tow truck. The older one turned and walked toward the truck. He didn't say goodbye. People like them didn't need to. The tow truck's engine started, pulling Ray's dead truck with it into the darkness, leaving him alone on the road. But this time, the solitude wasn't frightening. It felt like peace. The dawn finally came to Highway 13. The first light of the new day didn't just illuminate the desert, it illuminated a completely different Ray. He was no longer a truck driver. He was a part of this place. And so the story of the hitchhiker and the ghost bride at mile marker 74 began to fade with the passing years. In its place, truckers who traveled Highway 13 on the longest nights began to whisper a new legend. They say that if you're lost, if your truck breaks down, or if the ghosts of your own past begin to surface, you will sometimes see the headlights of an old 18-wheeler appear out of nowhere. The driver won't invite you into his truck. He'll just step down with a thermos of hot coffee in his hand and a tired but warm understanding in his eyes. He won't tell you ghost stories. He will listen to yours. He will listen to the promises you've broken, to the people you've left behind. And somehow, after talking to him, the weight in your heart will feel lighter. The road ahead will seem a little less dark. And when you're ready, your vehicle will miraculously start again. No one knows his name. They just call him the lamplighter, the teller of new stories on an old road, making sure that no soul has to travel alone in the dark. And on Highway 13, where tragedies were once born, now, sometimes, a few souls find their way home.
Tonight's tale has drawn to a close, but do not mistake it for mere fiction. Our world has countless shadowed corners, and the most terrifying stories are always the ones that are true. Thank you for listening. We will return to the darkness soon enough.